Imagine, for a moment, standing alone in a quiet room. There is no noise, no pressure, no judgment, only stillness. You are neither defending yourself nor chasing approval. You're simply whole, safe, free. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you truly felt that way? We live in a world where sharp edges hide behind smiles, where childhood wounds wear adult masks, and where people often confuse being strong with being unreachable. But beneath all our armor and performance, one truth pulses like a quiet drumbeat. Almost all of us have been hurt, and many are still bleeding inwardly. We walk through life bracing for impact, physically safe, perhaps, but emotionally armored, distrusting, half-closed. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again, not as a promise of invincibility, but as a whisper from the inner world, a call to return to the self, the part of you that existed before shame, fear, and betrayal, the part that cannot be harmed because it does not perform for protection. It simply is. But how do we get there? How do we reclaim that unshakable self, especially when we carry decades of programming that taught us to shrink, react, or lash out? This question isn't new. In fact, it's ancient. Long before psychology had a name, humans struggled with the same fundamental question. How do I become untouchable? Not through force or dominance, but through deep inner rootedness. The Stoics called it apatheia, the Buddhists called it equanimity, and the Sufis called it faina, the dissolving of the false self to remember the divine core. In every era, in every language, there have been whispers of a sacred state where the soul becomes immune, not because it escapes pain, but because it transcends its illusion. This script is a journey, not toward numbness, but toward integration, not toward egoic power, but inner sovereignty. Together, we'll explore how the ancient and modern worlds have approached the idea of inner invincibility. We'll trace the wounds we carry back to their cultural, historical, and psychological roots. And, most importantly, we'll walk through the healing, step by step. Because the truth is this: healing is not about forgetting what hurt you. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to be afraid of it. So take a deep breath. You're not alone here. You're not broken. You're just remembering who you were before the world taught you otherwise. To understand the deep longing behind Jung's words, nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again. We must first understand what, across time, we have feared. What is this pain that stalks us through generations, quietly shaping our thoughts, our choices, our stories? Pain has always been more than physical. In ancient times, a wound to the spirit was seen as dangerous as a wound to the flesh. The Greeks called it thymos, the spirited part of the soul, easily disturbed by shame, loss, or dishonor. The Egyptians spoke of ka and ba, parts of the soul that could be fragmented by trauma. Native traditions across the Americas have long believed in soul loss, a psychological spiritual injury requiring ritual retrieval. In other words, people have always known that to be alive is to be vulnerable, not only to others, but to ourselves. And so, every culture developed myths, philosophies, and psychological maps to explain why we hurt and how we heal. The masks of pain. Archetypes and armor. Across centuries, we've built armor out of necessity. When children feel emotionally unsafe, criticized, rejected, unseen, they adapt. One becomes a pleaser, trying to stay safe through approval. Another becomes angry, using control to avoid betrayal. Yet another detaches entirely, numbing out to avoid the risk of intimacy. These adaptations don't come from weakness. They come from wisdom, primitive, survival-based wisdom. But over time, they calcify. What was once protection becomes identity. Carl Jung described these adaptations as personas, masks we wear to survive the demands of society. But beneath every persona is a wounded child, still waiting to be seen. This idea is not unique to Jung. The Sufi mystics wrote of the nafs, the ego self, constantly shifting, defending, posturing, until it can be purified and returned to the essence. The Hindus spoke of Maya, the illusion of separateness that keeps the soul tangled in fear, and the early Christian desert fathers believed that stillness and silence could strip away these layers, revealing the divine image within. The pain of being hurt by abandonment, betrayal, humiliation is not just emotional. It is existential. It threatens our sense of worth, identity, and belonging. And so, humanity has always looked for ways to become immune, not by hardening, but by remembering. A history of seeking invulnerability. Let's journey briefly through time. In ancient Greece, Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius wrote of emotional invulnerability, not as detachment, but as ataraxia, a state of inner tranquility. The idea was simple. You cannot control what others do, but you can master your response. Their version of "nothing will hurt you again" was, "nothing external has power unless you give it meaning." In Eastern thought, Buddhism introduced the concept of non-attachment. The goal was not to feel nothing, but to feel everything without clinging or aversion. Suffering, said the Buddha, is born not from pain itself, but from our resistance to it. Emotional invulnerability meant freedom from reactivity, not freedom from feeling. In indigenous and shamanic cultures, the path to emotional strength often included rites of passage, deep encounters with fear, death, or solitude. These were not meant to traumatize, but to initiate. A boy who faced the dark and returned became a man. A woman who endured her own symbolic death returned as a healer. Pain became transformation. In Christian mysticism, saints and hermits spoke of the dark night of the soul, a period of profound inner suffering that paradoxically led to divine intimacy. Julian of Norwich, writing from her sickbed, declared, "All shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well." Her trust in the face of suffering echoed Jung's vision. Pain cannot touch the eternal self. And yet, despite these teachings, we kept forgetting. Centuries passed, industrialization came, empires rose and fell, psychology was born. Modern psychology, naming the wound, Freud, cracked open the unconscious mind, revealing that many adult behaviors stem from unresolved childhood dynamics. His work helped us name the shadows we used to only see in myth. Jung followed, adding depth, dreams, archetypes, the collective unconscious, showing us that healing is not just about fixing the mind, but integrating the soul. By the 20th century, trauma studies emerged, offering hard science to what mystics had long intuited, that the body keeps score, that emotional wounds aren't all in your head, they were encoded in your nervous system, your posture, your tone, your silence. So, what does this have to do with being invulnerable? Everything. Because the more we understand how trauma works, how fear hijacks the brain, how shame silences the voice, how unprocessed pain warps perception, the more we realize that true strength isn't in denial, but integration. To heal is not to erase what happened. It is to metabolize it so fully that it can no longer define you. What has changed and what hasn't? Today, we are more psychologically literate than ever. Words like triggered, boundaries, inner child, and attachment styles have entered everyday language. Therapy is no longer taboo. Meditation is mainstream. Somatic healing is rising. And yet, the ache remains. Many still live in constant emotional vigilance, afraid of rejection, overwhelmed by comparison, paralyzed by imposter syndrome. Social media magnifies insecurity. Capitalism feeds off inadequacy. The illusion of perfection whispers that if you're still hurting, you're failing. So yes, we've come far, but in many ways, we've simply traded one mask for another. What hasn't T changed, is the fundamental human need for emotional safety, and the realization that it cannot come from the outside. True invulnerability is not about control. It's about rootedness. It is the unshakable knowing that no matter what life brings, loss, betrayal, failure, you will not lose yourself. That is what Jung meant, and that is the path we now begin to walk. We often believe we are choosing our reactions, deciding who we trust, how we love, what we fear. But if we look closely, many of our choices are echoes. They're not fresh decisions, but protective patterns shaped long ago. And most of them are rooted in one deep need: to not be hurt again. To understand what Jung meant by nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again, we need to examine the architecture of the psyche, how it protects, adapts, and evolves. Modern psychology offers powerful insights into this terrain, and when paired with ancient wisdom, a richer, more holistic path to healing emerges. Let's begin where many wounds first form. Attachment and the original blueprint for safety. From the moment we are born, we seek connection. Our survival depends on it, not just physically, but emotionally. The way our caregivers respond to our needs teaches us something essential. Am I safe? Am I lovable? Is the world predictable or dangerous? This is the essence of attachment theory, pioneered by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth. It suggests that the emotional bonds we form in early life shape our adult relationships. A secure attachment teaches us, I can trust, I am valued, I am safe. An anxious attachment whispers, I must cling tightly or be abandoned. An avoidant attachment says, don't need anyone, stay distant to stay safe. A disorganized attachment reflects inner chaos. Love is dangerous, but I still crave it. If, as children, our emotional needs were consistently unmet, if love was conditional, presence unpredictable, or affection tied to performance, we internalize a world where pain feels inevitable. We build strategies. We suppress parts of ourselves. We adapt to survive. And so, even in adulthood, many of us aren't acting freely. We're reacting to ancient emotional blueprints. To truly become unhurtable, we must begin by updating this blueprint. That starts with awareness. Pause for thought. When you feel hurt, rejected, or afraid, whose voice are you actually hearing? Whose patterns are you repeating? The inner child and the shadow. Jung's map of the psyche. Carl Jung believed that our personality is composed of many parts, not all of them conscious. He introduced the idea of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, repress, or deny because we learned they were unacceptable. Perhaps you were told you were too sensitive, so you buried your tenderness. Or maybe you learned that showing fear was weakness, so you armored up with anger. The shadow isn't evil, it's exiled. It's the original self, disowned to survive. Alongside the shadow is what Jung and many therapists now call the inner child, the emotional memory of who you were before life taught you to hide. This child still lives within you, and when triggered, it is often this part that cries out, not the adult, but the child who once felt helpless, small, or unsafe. The journey to invulnerability, then, is not about suppression. It is about reparenting. Learning to hold space for your own pain, to validate, nurture, and respond to yourself with the care you may never have received. As Dr. Gabor Mate puts it, the wound is not your fault, but the healing is your responsibility. Nervous system. Regulation. The body keeps the score. Renowned trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk titled his book The Body Keeps the Score for a reason. Emotional pain is not only cognitive, it's somatic. It lives in your muscles, your posture, your breathing, your voice. When we feel threatened, the autonomic nervous system kicks in. If we can fight or flee, we activate sympathetic energy, adrenaline, urgency, readiness. But if we feel truly powerless, the body may shut down, entering freeze or collapse. This is why trauma survivors often feel numb, dissociated, or chronically tired. Their bodies learned that shutting down was the safest option. True healing, then, isn't just talk, it's regulation. It's learning to feel safe in your body, to ground yourself when panic rises, to reconnect with sensation, movement, and breath. Practices like somatic experiencing polyvagal theory informed therapy, breathwork, yoga, or shaking all help bring the body back into the present, because you cannot feel invulnerable in a body that still feels under siege. Journal prompt. What does safety feel like in your body? When was the last time you felt it? And how can you cultivate more of it, gently and consistently? Modern adaptations of ancient wisdom. Let's pause here and look at how ancient traditions mirrored these psychological insights. The Buddhist concept of mindfulness is essentially nervous system regulation. It teaches presence, observation without judgment, and the ability to sit with discomfort without being consumed by it. Sufi practices, like whirling or reciting sacred names, zikr, often induce trance-like states that allow trauma to move through the body, accessing healing beyond logic. The Stoics, centuries ago, practiced cognitive reframing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Jung's idea of individuation, becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self, is echoed in myths around the world. The hero's journey, the phoenix rising, the spiritual alchemist transforming base metal into gold. What modern psychology names ancient wisdom felt. And when we bring them together, we create a healing that is not only rational, but soulful. Integration, not escape. It is tempting to think the goal is to never feel pain again, to become so healed that nothing stings. But that's not invulnerability, that's dissociation. True invulnerability is integration, the ability to feel deeply, respond wisely, and return to center quickly. It's not that people stop hurting you, it's that their hurt no longer defines you. You no longer build your identity around what they did. You no longer filter your future through the lens of your past. You no longer abandon yourself to keep others comfortable. You become your own inner sanctuary. The great poet Rumi once wrote, "Try not to resist the changes that come your way. Instead, let life live through you." This is the heart of it. To feel everything but not be broken by anything. To remain soft in a world that tried to harden you. To trust your own voice, even when the world gaslights your truth. That's the quiet revolution Jung was pointing toward. So far, we've explored where emotional pain comes from, how it's encoded into our psyche, and how it lives in the body. But what happens when we don't address it? When the wounds remain unspoken, unseen, or misunderstood? The consequences of emotional injury and our strategies to avoid feeling it can be subtle, pervasive, and life-altering. Many people are not suffering from their pain, but from the ways they've tried to not feel it. In this section, we dive into the very real personal, emotional, and societal consequences of neglecting the inner world. Not to judge, but to understand, because so often our deepest suffering comes from believing we are alone in it. The price of protection. Who do you become when you can't be hurt? Let's say you've been hurt before, by betrayal, abandonment, humiliation. So you promise yourself, never again. That promise may become a wall. At first, it feels strong, protective. But over time, you realize you don't let people close. You question every compliment. You sabotage intimacy just before it becomes real. You overwork, overgive, or overachieve to stay worthy. You dismiss your own needs because others have it worse. These are not random personality quirks. They are survival mechanisms with emotional consequences. And here's the paradox. In trying not to be hurt again, you end up hurting yourself, quietly, daily, invisibly. You harden, you shrink, you forget. You forget what it's like to cry without shame. You forget how to ask for help. You forget that vulnerability is not weakness, but a bridge to real connection. And that kind of forgetting costs us everything. Reflection. Prompt. What parts of yourself have you silenced in the name of strength? Relationships. The mirror and the minefield. One of the clearest places we see the consequences of emotional wounding is in our relationships. Love is a mirror. It reflects back not only beauty but every unhealed wound. And so, if you haven't addressed your pain, your relationships will trigger it. The partner who withdraws might ignite your fear of abandonment. The boss who criticizes may reawaken your inner critic. The friend who forgets your birthday might feel like childhood neglect all over again. But instead of recognizing this as an old pattern rising to be healed, we often react. We blame them. We withdraw silently, waiting for people to read our minds. We lash out and regret it, or people please and resent it. Unhealed pain distorts perception. You are not reacting to the moment. You reacting to every moment that ever felt like it. And unless you've done the work to become aware of your own emotional ecosystem, you'll either project your wounds onto others, or accept treatment that reopens them. Worse still, many people confuse familiar pain with love. If you grew up around emotional unavailability, chaos, or inconsistency, you might be drawn to it, not because it's healthy, but because it's known. Safe pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. Until we heal, love often feels like a battlefield, when it's meant to feel like coming home. If you don't heal what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you. Unknown, identity and confidence. Who are you without the wound? Here's something few talk about. We can become attached to our pain. It becomes a part of our identity. The anxious child becomes the hyper-responsible adult. The overlooked teen becomes the perfectionist. The betrayed partner becomes the control freak. The dismissed creative becomes the overachiever. We mistake our armor for our essence. This creates an internal prison. Even when life gets better, we don't feel better, because our sense of self was built around lack, fear, or striving. To lose that identity, even for something better, feels like death. And so, we unconsciously self-sabotage. We stay in toxic jobs, relationships, thought patterns, because leaving them would mean rewriting who we are. This is why Jung's work focused so much on individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the wounded and exiled parts of the psyche into one cohesive self. Until we do that, confidence is always conditional. It relies on circumstances staying favorable, masks staying intact, applause never stopping. But real self-worth is unconditional. It doesn't rise and fall with others' opinions. It's rooted in being, not doing. And that kind of worth is impossible to steal. Pause for thought. Who would you be if you weren't afraid of being hurt? If you trusted yourself enough to stay soft in a hard world? Cultural and historical echoes of emotional suppression. This is not just a personal issue. Entire cultures are built on the denial of emotion. In the West, particularly in patriarchal systems, emotions like sadness, fear, and tenderness have been feminized, and therefore devalued. Boys are told not to cry. Girls are told not to be too emotional. Everyone learns to perform safety while quietly unraveling inside. In collectivist cultures, the suppression often comes through family loyalty. Don't speak up, don't break tradition, don't air the family's pain in public. The pressure to conform becomes stronger than the need to heal. In capitalism, worth is tied to productivity. There's no space to grieve, pause, or feel deeply. You're either winning or invisible. This isn't just psychology. It's sociology. It's history. It's legacy. But the consequence is the same. People who look fine on the outside but are silently suffering, smiling through breakdowns, achieving through exhaustion, numbing through consumption. Jung believed the individual soul mirrored the collective. If we want a more compassionate world, we must first build compassionate inner lives. The cost of not healing. Let's be clear, the cost of unhealed pain is not just emotional. It's physical. It's existential. Chronic stress and inflammation, sleep issues, digestion problems, autoimmune flare-ups, addictions and compulsions, difficulty setting or respecting boundaries, a persistent feeling that life is happening to you, not with you, and perhaps most tragically, a life unlived, dreams postponed, love avoided, talents unused, joy unrecognized. Because when we don't trust life, we don't really live it. We perform it. At the core of healing is this idea. You become the parent, the protector, the witness your inner child never had. Inner reparenting means you learn to validate your feelings instead of suppressing them, set boundaries without guilt, talk to yourself with the kindness you'd give a friend, say no, not because you're cruel, but because you are whole. This practice can begin simply, with a daily check-in. What do I need today to feel safe, connected, and alive? At first, you may hear silence, but over time, your inner world speaks. Loudly, lovingly, wisely. Journaling. Prompts. What did I need most as a child that I didn't receive consistently? How can I offer myself that now? On my terms, in my rhythm. Healing begins when you realize the voice you needed most is the one you are relearning to become. 2. Nervous system. Work. Safety begins in the body. You can't think your way out of trauma. You have to feel your way to safety. That's where nervous system regulation comes in. Your body needs to believe it's safe before your mind will follow. Start with small, daily acts. Breathwork, a simple 4 to 78 breath. Inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8, calms your vagus nerve. Movement, walk, stretch, dance. Trauma often lives in stillness. Cold water splashes on the face or wrists can reset your parasympathetic system. Touch. Place one hand on your heart and one on your belly. Tell your body, you are safe now. You can also explore Somatic Experiencing Therapy, TRE, Tension and Trauma Releasing Exercises. Yoga Nidra and Body Scans. These aren't luxury wellness routines. They're survival rewiring tools used by trauma therapists worldwide. The body remembers, but it can also relearn. Bessel van der Kolk. 3. Emotional literacy. Naming is taming. Most of us were taught how to read books, but not how to read ourselves. One of the most radical acts of healing is building emotional vocabulary. Because what you can name, you can nurture. Try this practice. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what did I feel today? Where did I feel it? What did I need but maybe didn't know how to ask for? Over time, you shift from reacting to reflecting, from confusion to clarity, from being hijacked by emotions to coexisting with them. You become your own emotional anchor. 4. Boundary work, protecting peace. Without building walls, boundaries are not punishments. They are clarity and kindness. They say, this is what's okay for me. This is how I love and want to be loved. This is where I end and you begin. Most people who fear setting boundaries were punished for having needs. Start gently. Say, I need some time to think, instead of defaulting to yes. Say, that doesn't work for me, without needing to over-explain. Say, I'm not available for that kind of conversation right now. Boundaries protect not only your time, but your inner child, your nervous system, your energy. They are acts of love. 5. Archetype integration. Myth as medicine. Jung believed healing meant integrating all parts of ourselves, including the archetypal energies we carry. Ask yourself, where am I overly identified with the wounded child? Do I need to embody the wise elder, the warrior, the healer, the lover? Am I suppressing the rebel, the mystic, the artist? You can bring these to life through art, storytelling, visualization, or dream work. The goal isn't to become someone else. It is to reunite with the parts of you that got exiled when pain taught you to survive. Myths, like those of Inanna, Persephone, or the Phoenix, show us death is not the end, it's transformation, and every descent has a return. 6. Community and witnessing. Healing happens in relationship. While much healing is solitary, true transformation requires being seen. This can look like trusted friends who hold space without fixing a therapist or coach trained in trauma-informed care, a support group where masks are optional. Even sharing your story, artfully, slowly, with care. In safe spaces, you learn a new truth. Not everyone will abandon, shame, or betray you. This begins to rewrite the nervous system, and it teaches the most powerful lesson of all. If I can be loved here, maybe I was never unlovable to begin with. 7. Spiritual anchoring. Something deeper holds you. When life feels chaotic, many find peace in something larger, call it God, the self, source, or simply meaning. Spiritual practices, especially those rooted in stillness and reflection, offer grounding. Meditation, not to escape, but to witness. Sufi zikr, repeating sacred names until the ego melts. Christian contemplative prayer, silence as communion. Stoic journaling, asking, what is within my control today? Nature rituals, walking barefoot, watching the moon rise, lighting candles with intention. You don't need to believe in anything specific. You just need to feel connected, to life, to self, to something timeless. This is where true invulnerability is born, not from walls, but from rootedness. I am held, even when I'm hurt, especially then. Practice, not perfection. You are not a project. You are a person. Healing is not about erasing pain. It's about expanding capacity. You still feel hurt, but it doesn't shatter you. You still get triggered, but you know how to return to yourself. You still get scared, but you don't abandon your heart. Over time, your sense of self becomes anchored, not in performance, not in control, not in others, but in presence. You become the calm inside the storm, the deep river beneath the waves, the self that never left, only went quiet. And when Jung said, "Nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again," this is what he meant. Not that you are untouchable, but that you are untaken, unabandoned, unlost. Here. By now, we've walked together through pain, protection, memory, mythology, and healing. We've learned that what hurts us doesn't have to define us, that strength doesn't mean being untouched, but being able to touch what hurts, without losing ourselves. That the greatest power is not invulnerability, but integration. Jung's words. Nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again. Were never a promise of immunity. They were a whisper to the deeper self, the self that remembers. You are not fragile. You are not broken. You are not your fear, your trauma, your mistakes, or your masks. You are the one who watches it all, the one who survived, the one who now chooses to live, fully, fiercely, softly. The cycle of descent and return. Throughout history, healing has always been depicted as a descent into the underworld, the shadow, the cave of the soul. Think of Persephone, taken into the darkness, only to rise again, transformed. Think of Christ's death and resurrection. Think of the Sufis' annihilation of the ego to remember the beloved. Think of the hero's journey, the abyss, then the return. We, too, descend into pain, confusion, doubt. But healing is not just about going down. It's about coming back up, with gifts, with wisdom, with a new story. When you return from your inner darkness, you return different. Not harder, but clearer. Not colder, but deeper. Not numb, but discerning. You no longer need to armor your heart, because your strength now lives in your spine. The new story. Healing invites us to rewrite the narrative. From, I was hurt, so I must be guarded, to, I was hurt, and I healed, and now I can choose with clarity. From, people can't be trusted, to, I can trust myself to choose the right people. From, my pain defines me, to, my healing reveals me. This doesn't mean we erase what happened. We honor it, but we no longer serve it. We no longer build our lives around a wound. We build it around who we've become in the process of healing. Pause for thought. What story are you ready to stop repeating? What story is waiting to be born through you? We are all in this together. If nothing else, let this be your reminder. You are not alone. Your wounds may be private, but they are not unique. Humanity has carried these sorrows for generations. You are part of a lineage of healing, a thread in a larger tapestry. And every time you face your shadow with courage, you help lighten the collective one. Every time you choose compassion over control, reflection over reaction, curiosity over judgment, you become the kind of person who doesn't just protect their peace, but transforms the world. Because emotionally safe people create emotionally safe spaces. And those spaces ripple outward, in your friendships, in your partnerships, in how you parent, in how you lead, in how you love. The journey continues. Healing is not a destination. It's a relationship, with yourself, with life, with the sacred. Some days you'll feel grounded. Other days you'll want to hide. But every day you'll be closer to remembering. You don't have to become someone else to be safe. You just have to become yourself again. That's the paradox Jung gave us. When you integrate your pain, your shame, your fear, your fire, when you meet your inner child with care, your shadow with curiosity, your story with reverence, then nothing and nobody can hurt you, not because life stops being hard, but because you stop abandoning yourself when it is. You meet the world from within, not without. You become whole. And wholeness, dear one, is the most unbreakable thing in the universe. Imagine, for a moment, standing alone in a quiet room. There is no noise, no pressure, no judgment, only stillness. You are neither defending yourself nor chasing approval. You're simply whole, safe, free. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you truly felt that way? We live in a world where sharp edges hide behind smiles, where childhood wounds wear adult masks, and where people often confuse being strong with being unreachable. But beneath all our armor and performance, one truth pulses like a quiet drumbeat. Almost all of us have been hurt, and many are still bleeding inwardly. We walk through life bracing for impact, physically safe, perhaps, but emotionally armored, distrusting, half-closed. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you again, not as a promise of invincibility, but as a whisper from the inner world, a call to return to the self, the part of you that existed before shame, fear, and betrayal, the part that cannot be harmed because it does not perform for protection. It simply is. But how do we get there? How do we reclaim that unshakable self, especially when we carry decades of programming that taught us to shrink, react, or lash out? This question isn't new. In fact, it's ancient. Long before psychology had a name, humans struggled with the same fundamental question. How do I become untouchable? Not through force or dominance, but through deep inner rootedness. The Stoics called it apatheia, the Buddhists called it equanimity, and the Sufis called it faina, the dissolving of the false self to remember the divine core. In every era, in every language, there have been whispers of a sacred state where the soul becomes immune, not because it escapes pain, but because it transcends its illusion. This script is a journey, not toward numbness, but toward integration, not toward egoic power, but inner sovereignty. Together, we'll explore how the ancient and modern worlds have approached the idea of inner invincibility. We'll trace the wounds we carry back to their cultural, historical, and psychological roots. And, most importantly, we'll walk through the healing, step by step. Because the truth is this: healing is not about forgetting what hurt you. It's about becoming the kind of person who no longer needs to be afraid of it. So take a deep breath. You're not alone here. You're not broken. You're just remembering who you were before the world taught you otherwise.